Welcome, everybody. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Jason DeBono, Vice President here at Newview Trust Company. And today we're going to be sharing something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the Coverdell Educational Savings Account. Just a couple of housekeeping tips. If you do have questions, I certainly would love to hear them. At the top of your screen or in the box that you have, if you simply type those in under the Q&A, those will pop up on my screen and I'll be able to get those read aloud, and we'll get those addressed while we're on the video today. The second thing is just maybe an apology. I'm sorry for such a sterile background. I'm not in a closet, but I'm in a temporary office because the office that I normally occupy where I would record these, they're doing some construction and redoing the carpet, and so I've had to relocate for today's session. So again, I apologize for somewhat of just a plain background behind me. But today we're going to talk about Coverdell Educational Savings Accounts. Some people call them CESAs or ESAs. Educational Savings Account is the more common name for them as well. But we're going to walk through today really all around the idea and understanding of saving for college in a tax-advantaged manner. And so as we go through this today, I'm going to reference a couple other plans and items. Some of them may be Florida-based, and that's just because that's where I happen to be sitting today, and so I'm going to use that as an example. But make sure that you go and look at any of your own state's programs as well when comparing the Coverdell. The other thing that that I want to make sure we point out is that I'm speaking really from two sides of this equation. Number one, I've been with Newview for the last 14 years. I've seen lots of different savings vehicles. Certainly, we specialize in tax-advantaged savings, and so I've seen the Coverdell used many, many times. The other side of that coin is as a father of an 8-year-old, and I've got a newborn that's due in November. I'm also very aware of this from a user standpoint, and so I'm going to talk a little bit today about both my personal experience as well as professional experience in the differences between some of the plans that are available and what I think are the benefits that ultimately cause me and a lot of our clients to settle in on the Coverdell versus some of the other plans that are available. As with any webinar that we do, anything that we say and cover today is not to be relied on as legal or tax advice or any kind of financial advice. We are in the business of self-directed retirement account custody. And we should your evaluation. So without further ado, I'm actually going to kind of walk through this in a process today where we talk about the different plans that exist to save for college. And this one comes up pretty frequently, as far as what are the options. And so the first one that you see here is Florida prepaid. I just pulled a couple of items. And again, some of these are just from my understanding. Some of these are a little bit of research, and then some of these are stuff that I found in my own, due diligence on college savings plans. So the first plan here is really we're going to go through 3 plans, including the Coverdell. The first one is a college prepaid plan. Now I know I think almost every state has some version of this. And they've gotten to a point now where they do work pretty universally from state to state. But the plan itself is unique because you're pre-buying your college credits. Every other plan that exists is a savings-based plan. So you're saving and then you're spending your savings at that time. Florida prepaid works really in an opposite manner. It says, what do you want to buy today? And you pay today for something that you will ultimately use or your kids or grandkids will use tomorrow. So it's a fixed cost for set tuition. You can buy different programs, 2-year, 4-year university. I pulled the numbers and I ran this morning to update this. If you were to buy it today and you were to do the monthly payment, so from the day that your child is born, every month until they reach 18, excuse me, your monthly cost would be about $186 per month. Right? It works out to be a little over $2,000 per year. and that works out to be about $42,000 in total cost to you to buy 4 years, 120 credit hours of university tuition at any of the 12 major colleges or state colleges here in Florida. Again, the numbers may be similar or the same in whatever state those on the call may be occupying. When you go, what I did and where I came up with this kind of the way that the return is calculated in, I went in and looked, what they're doing is providing you $66,000 of value. So if you were to go in, basically they'll declare that the expected value of your investment is going to be about $66,000. If you take that money and factor it back down, it works out to be about a 4.6% return. You can pay 29% and buy it as or $29,000 and buy your 4 years of tuition as a lump sum. And at that, factoring down works out to be about 4.5%. So there's no investments that you have to manage. You really have a lot less flexibility. This plan can be transferred to a sibling, which is nice. So if you have a child that doesn't go to college, here's the part that I think is the biggest drawback to this plan. I do think there's some other drawbacks, but I think the biggest kind of risk to this plan is if you decide, or in this case your child or grandchild decides not to go to college, you can be refunded, but there's no earnings. So if you put in $30,000, you're going to get $30,000 back. And that's something that, that's pretty hard to make a $186 a month investment for the next 18 years and be at risk of not getting that back. And I think this plan may put a lot of pressure, on kids to go to college, and it puts a lot of kids in college that may not have a need to be there or want to be there. And I'm not suggesting in any way college is going away, but I think for those on the call, we'd all agree college looks a lot different today than it did 20 years ago. When I was in school, and it looks a lot different, than it was 50 years ago. And the idea of college for a lot of millennials in today's environment is they don't put the same weight and value on it maybe than that their parents and grandparents do. So Florida prepaid is certainly an opportunity, and I say Florida prepaid again, it's just where I pulled examples from. Almost every state has a prepaid college program. The plan that comes up quite frequently that really is the most comparable, in my opinion, to the Coverdell Education Account that we're going to talk about in just a minute is the 529 College Savings Plan. The thing that is probably the most attractive about this, especially when compared to a Coverdell, is that there are no contribution limits to the plan. As a general rule. Now, the balance cannot exceed state-imposed total educational expense limits, but that number ranges from about $230,000 to $550,000. So, in theory, if you're saving a significant amount of money in this, you may get yourself to a point where there's some limits. But you also want to be mindful of the annual gift tax exclusion. This is considered a gift to the beneficiary, and so there is annual limits to how much you can contribute. There's also some different tax legislation that you ought to take a look at for 529s. There's a 5-year plan where you can make a lump sum contribution to put in more than the annual gift tax exclusion and then spread that out over 5 years. So for someone that may want to make a lump sum contribution or into that account, maybe it's beneficial for them from a tax perspective to do it. The beneficiary can in turn not have to pay any sort of gift tax on those funds if they meet that 5-year criteria. So something to take a look at. There is some state deductions in these plans as well. So take a look if you reside in a state that may be valuable where they provide a tax incentive for you to contribute. They can transfer to siblings, which is nice. It is tax-free growth. Now, the money you put in is not tax deductible, but the growth on that money is tax-free so long as it's used to pay for qualifying educational expenses. This account has parental control, meaning the parents, or in this case grandparents, a lot of times we see it as the parents, can actually control the investment distributions for the life of the account. So the beneficiary, they don't have to worry about the beneficiary at age 18 and receiving this lump sum of money that's been saved for them and then using it for a variety of different things. The investments in this are managed. All right, so the investments that you make, there's no investment control. You're putting this in the hands of investment managers. And the investment, I tried to pull some numbers, and the numbers can be all over the place, but you can kind of do your own research on what kind of rate of return you believe those dollars are going to earn you. And then it must be withdrawn after graduation. So in the event that your beneficiary is say a child, and that child graduates, unless they're going to post-secondary education, that money typically has to be withdrawn, and generally they'll have to pay tax and a small penalty on any of the unused funds, and that's no different than a Coverdell either. So I'll pause there and take a look and see if there's any questions up to this point. So I'll go ahead and move into the Coverdell because this plan is something that, it is the plan that we chose for Tyler, and it's the same plan that we'll continue to do for our daughter when she's born, as a way to be able to save. And I'll talk a little bit about this plan, and then we're going to talk through the plans from a different standpoint, because ultimately it may not be a one-size-fits-all. There may be reasons why you would choose one of these plans over the other, and there may be reasons why you may choose more than one. So the first thing in a Coverdell ESA is the $2,000 annual limit. There are annual income limits, $110,000 filing singly, $220,000 filing jointly. The nice thing is, in the event that you are over the income limit, you can make a gift to someone else that is under the limit, who can in turn make a contribution to their account. So it's kind of, I won't say a foolish income limit, but generally a $2,000 gift to somebody is not going to in any way trigger any sort of estate or gift tax, even if you did it every year. And so there's some benefits there to being able to avoid that income limit and still qualify for the Coverdell. One of the big things in the Coverdell that's really attractive is it covers K through 12 non-tuition expenses as well. So if you were to look at a 529 plan, it will cover basic tuition for K through 12. So if you wanted to put a child into private middle school, both the Coverdell and the 529 would provide value there from a tuition standpoint. But what's not covered under a 529 at the K through 12 level is non-tuition expenses. So depending on the school and requirements, you have books and even all the way up to room and board that may be considered covered. Laptops, iPads, things that are required for them to participate in the educational program or curriculum generally are going to be covered. And so the Coverdell provides a lot more flexibility prior to post-secondary education. So that's something that, depending on your approach and plan for saving for education, if your goal is to save for college exclusively, then that really isn't a big benefit. If your goal is to put money away to save for education, depending on what that may be, then that's something that you may want to take a look at and can be used. The nice part about the Coverdell from a K through 12 standpoint is I've seen parents that have put their child in private school, use their Coverdell to pay for it, and bought a better education, which translated into potential scholarship to reduce the amount of money they spent on college itself. So how you manage that in your own family is up to you, but just know that you have a lot more flexibility in a Coverdell as far as paying for expenses as a whole, but certainly non-tuition related K through 12 expenses. The part that's attracted me the most to the Coverdell was the fact that it's self-directed. So if you remember in the first slide, we talked about Florida prepay really boils down to, if you get maximum value, it's about 4.6% return. If you were to go into 529 plans, that's in managed funds, and that's going to have a return. My guess is going to be around 6 or 7%, maybe on your best years. What's amazing about the Coverdell is it can be self-directed. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do with Tyler, my son's Coverdell, and what it's done over the years. But that plan has full flexibility and investment growth, and the average return in that account is in double digits. For the last 8 years, it's averaged about 10 to 12%, depending on the investments in the year. So it's really outperformed, and it's grown both in contributions and in income, and that's something that I think is an important consideration when you're deciding about the savings vehicle for a minor's future education. This too has parental control, so you do reserve the right to turn it over to the beneficiary at the age of 18, or you reserve the right to manage it on your own as the parent or guardian. You can transfer it to a sibling. So, just to give an example, I mentioned I've got an 8-year-old and one on the way. In the event that we could only contribute to one of the accounts for the year, right, we may not have the capital to put more than $2,000 in, we would put that into the oldest child's Coverdell, because that one is the one that is going to be needing the money first. But more importantly, in the event that it's not spent, we can simply transfer the beneficiary from our oldest child to our youngest child, and that money can grow for an even longer period of time, until she gets to college, and then that money is available for her. So there's some flexibility there, and as well as some strategy. You want to make sure that you're thinking through all the different scenarios, and especially for those that are on the call that may have multiple children. And you're trying to figure out how and where to save. As a general rule, saving for the oldest child is generally best, because even if they don't spend it, you reserve the right to move that down to other siblings as well. The money has to be withdrawn by age 30. Just like a 529, any growth is taxed, so you're not going to pay any sort of tax on principal, and you pay a 10% penalty. But unlike the Florida prepaid program, whereby all the money that you put in you simply get out, in both the 529 and the Coverdell, even if it's not used for education, that money is still eligible to be distributed, and the earnings are yours to keep. You don't forego those. You just pay tax on them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you've had all the tax-deferred growth on that money for as long as you've had it in there. And a lot of times when people ask, we do hear questions like, what if I have too much money saved, or other things? And I think obviously those are great problems to have. The ability to transfer them to other siblings, as well as the ability to use them for many items beyond tuition, makes it hard to have money left in them afterwards. And it's possible you were a really good saver and a good investor, but the ability for you to use them, even if your child was on scholarship for college, even 100% scholarship, there's still going to be ancillary things that may not be covered, and your Coverdell can step in and cover those. And the nice thing is, in the event that it can't be used, what a nice gift for your child for that money to be able to be withdrawn. Yes, they'll pay a little bit of tax, and if they do it in their last year of college, their income should be pretty darn low, where the tax bill will be negligible and the 10% penalty on earnings will be negligible, and that money can be used to go put as a down payment on a house, or for them to start their career. And so there's no penalty in any way, shape, or form for someone to make it through the collegiate process, or whatever post-secondary educational process they take. There's no reason for them to worry about having too much money. You can certainly find ways for that money to go to good use. So I'm going to kind of go to the slide that highlights the three, and I want to kind of cover just a couple of things here. And again, if you do have any questions, now would be a great time to get those asked. I'd love to understand some of the thought process that you guys are going through, those of you that are on the call today. So as we go through and we talk about these plans, I'm going to highlight really kind of the key things that stood out to me and why the Coverdell made the most sense. For me, Florida prepaid was really, it was not even an option, because, to me, I think college is a great program. I went through college, but I also understand that college may not be the best approach for everyone. I'm a big fan of vocational schools, and people receiving, trade certifications and qualifications, and going into doing other things that may not require that. And so with Florida prepaid, that was a big issue for me. The second big one is the fact that if they don't go to college, you don't get anything back but what you put in. And that to me was, I felt like the reward didn't outweigh the risk. And I felt like there was no real upside, but there certainly is a lot of downside in 18 years of money not generating any sort of earnings. And, being in this investment world that we occupy here at Newview, I'm able to see the power of compounding interest and earnings and good returns, and what kind of difference they can have over long periods of time, and you forego that in the Florida prepaid or any really prepaid college program that I'm familiar with. 529s are very attractive because they do have no contribution limit. They allow you to sock a lot of money away. However, the average family is not putting that much money into those plans. So, one of the things that it's attractive, but it also represents something that really doesn't apply to too many people. I don't know how many people are putting $15,000 or $20,000 a year into their kids' college savings plans. That's a very expensive. A lot of people are using the 529s as a estate planning tool. The other thing that for me that was a major drawback to the 529 plan is a little bit of a set it and forget it, and I'm not a big fan of putting money away in that manner. And that is that you put the money in someone else's hands and then they tell you what it's worth 18 years from now. And that was something that I thought was a pretty big, for me, a pretty big issue. The third thing that the 529, I looked at that caused me to move to a different plan had to do with the fact that the expense opportunity for qualifying educational expenses really doesn't kick in until after high school, beyond tuition. And I felt like that's pretty limiting. And if there's an opportunity, for a child to make some, to make financial decisions in high school that may, strongly impact their college opportunities or vocational opportunities, that was a big limitation in that beyond tuition, there's not a lot that 529 is going to be able to do for you. So those are the reasons that caused me to kind of look at the Coverdell. And what I loved about the Coverdell was complete investment control. And that's really what drove me to it. So to give you a perspective, we've had a Coverdell personally had one 8 years for Tyler, our son. And that account over the years, if you kind of think about it, when you put $2,000 in per year, it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility to invest. But what's great about Coverdells, along with any other retirement account, is you can invest that money side by side. And so personally, for the last 10 or 12 years, I've done a lot of private lending in my self-directed accounts. And this was great because I simply partnered off the investments that I made in my accounts that had more funds in them, and I simply bought a small piece with my son's Coverdell into that loan. And so the loans I've done, I've had loans inside the account as high as 15%, as low as 10%, and those loan payments pro rata back to the amount that Coverdell invested go right back into the educational account. And so, I stepped back and looked at the numbers and thought if, we contribute $2,000 for 18 years, which is $36,000, and we make good sound investments along the way, that account can grow to $70,000, $80,000, or $90,000, which can provide a pretty substantial opportunity for someone to cover collegiate or vocational or post-secondary educational expenses. So the self-directed portion by far is the most attractive option, coupled by the fact that it grows from a tax advantage manner. Those were the things that made that Coverdell or educational savings account the most attractive option that we could come across. At this point, as we wrap up, I will pause here for just a minute and see if we have any questions about any of the plans, but certainly the Coverdell, before we close this webinar out for the day. I will say, just kind of a tip and something to look at through this process is really to go and do some research on these plans and crunch some numbers. There's a lot of good data out there. You can get a good feel for what kind of returns the 529 is delivering, and then go to your state and determine, what the college prepaid program looks like. I know when I was in college, a lot of friends, their parents had set up the college prepaid program for them, and in going through it with some of their parents, it made tremendous sense. Because you were really buying credits at today's prices. So you would buy 120 college credits today, and you would pay the price as you bought them. I think what's happened is as tuition has gone up so much, and the credit hour cost has gone up so much, the college prepaid programs are underfunded. And to combat that, they're no longer selling you today's, tomorrow's credit at today's prices. What they're doing is they're really selling you tomorrow's credits at what they think tomorrow's prices are going to be, and they're just delivering a payment program for you to pay them. And to me, that's a little bit of a risk that you may be taking, depending on what happens with tuition, and obviously there's a lot of political impact on how tuition is managed and handled. And so the idea of moving into a plan like a Coverdell that provides the most flexibility was the most attractive. At this point, we haven't gotten any questions in, so I will assume that there aren't any. I appreciate everyone joining us today and taking a bit of time to kind of learn a little bit about the Coverdell ESA as well as some of the benefits and drawbacks to the 529 and the college prepaid programs. We do custody the educational savings account. They are fully self-directed, meaning you can buy and sell any investment that's legally permissible in a self-directed account inside your ESA, and we're certainly happy to assist. And for most of our clients, this is an account that would be invested right alongside a different account that they hold with us. So if those on the call that have an IRA with us that are currently self-directing, if your goal is to mirror or extend the investments that you're doing there into this Coverdell or Coverdell educational accounts for kids and grandkids, we can certainly help with that process. So thank you guys very much for joining us today. I appreciate the time, and if you do have questions about these plans going forward, certainly please don't hesitate to reach out to one of our team members here, and we'll be happy to assist. But thank you very much, everybody.